Today, California once again finds itself at the center of a major political clash in the United States. The governor of California is facing growing pressure after a new federal policy triggered tension between state and federal authorities. This conflict highlights long-standing disagreements over how states and Washington should share power, responsibility, and resources. California is not new to federal-state disputes. As the most populous state in the country and one of the world's largest economies, decisions made in California often have national consequences. That is exactly why this latest policy clash has drawn so much attention. At the heart of the issue is a disagreement over federal policy priorities and how they affect California's laws, funding, and governance. Federal officials argue that the new policy is necessary to ensure national consistency and enforcement. California leaders, on the other hand, say the policy interferes with state authority and threatens programs that millions of residents depend on. This disagreement has now placed the California governor under intense political, legal, and public pressure. Supporters of the governor argue that California has the right to set policies that reflect the values and needs of its residents. They point out that California often leads the nation on issues such as climate policy, immigration protections, and social programs. Critics, however, argue that California is challenging federal authority too aggressively, putting federal funding and cooperation at risk. So what exactly triggered this clash? According to official statements, the conflict began after the federal government announced changes to how certain programs would be funded and regulated. These changes directly affect areas where California has adopted policies that differ from federal priorities. State officials say the new federal rules could limit funding or impose conditions that conflict with California law. That has raised alarms across multiple state agencies. The governor's office responded by issuing a strong statement defending California's position. The statement emphasized that California's policies are lawful, voter-supported, and designed to protect residents. However, the response did not end the dispute. Instead, it escalated tensions. Federal officials warned that states refusing to comply with the new rules could face funding consequences. That warning immediately increased pressure on California's leadership. For California, the stakes are high. The state relies on billions of dollars in federal funding for infrastructure, healthcare, disaster response, housing, and education. Any disruption could have serious impacts on local governments and communities. At the same time, backing down could anger voters who expect the governor to stand firm against federal pressure. This puts the governor in a difficult position. Political analysts say this is not just a policy disagreement. It is also a test of leadership and strategy. The governor must balance resistance with responsibility. If California challenges the policy too aggressively, it risks legal battles and funding delays. If it complies too easily, it risks criticism from voters and advocacy groups who want stronger resistance. Legal experts say a court challenge is possible. California has a history of taking federal disputes to court, especially when state leaders believe federal actions overstep constitutional boundaries. Such legal battles can take months or even years, creating uncertainty in the meantime. Meanwhile, public reaction has been mixed. Some Californians support the governor's stance, viewing it as a defense of state rights and local values. Others worry that prolonged conflict with Washington could hurt everyday services. Local officials are also watching closely. Cities and counties depend heavily on federal-state cooperation. Any funding disruption could force difficult budget decisions at the local level. As pressure builds, the governor faces increasing questions from lawmakers, media, and the public. How far is California willing to go, and what will the federal government do next? These questions set the stage for what could become one of the most significant federal-state confrontations in recent years. As the federal-state conflict continues, pressure on the California governor is coming from multiple directions. Inside the state legislature, lawmakers are debating how to respond. Some are calling for a firm legal challenge, while others urge caution and negotiation. Business groups are also paying close attention. California's economy is deeply connected to federal programs and regulations. Uncertainty around funding and compliance can affect investment decisions, job growth, and long-term planning. Environmental groups have voiced concern that federal pressure could weaken California's environmental standards. California has long set stricter rules than federal minimums, often influencing national policy in the process. Immigration advocates are also watching closely. California has adopted policies aimed at protecting immigrant communities, and any federal move perceived as limiting those protections quickly becomes controversial. On the other side, critics of the governor argue that constant conflict with Washington creates instability. They say cooperation, not confrontation, is the best way to secure funding and ensure smooth governance. This debate is playing out not just in government offices, but also in public opinion. Polls and public commentary show Californians divided on how aggressively the state should challenge federal authority. Some residents prioritize protecting state policies at all costs. Others worry about practical consequences, such as delays in infrastructure projects or reduced funding for public services. Nationally, the situation is also being watched. Other states with similar policy disagreements are paying attention to how California responds. A strong stand by California could encourage other states to resist federal policies. A compromise could signal a shift toward negotiation. Political analysts say this clash could shape future elections. Federal-state conflicts often become campaign issues used by both sides to energize voters. How the governor handles this moment could influence public perception of leadership strength and effectiveness. There is also the legal dimension. If California decides to challenge the federal policy in court, the case could set an important precedent. Courts may be asked to clarify the limits of federal authority versus state autonomy. Such rulings can reshape policy far beyond California. For now, negotiations continue behind the scenes. State officials are reportedly exploring options to protect funding while maintaining key policies. Federal officials, meanwhile, are emphasizing enforcement and compliance. The coming weeks will be critical. Observers say several outcomes are possible. One scenario is a negotiated compromise where California agrees to partial compliance in exchange for continued funding. Another scenario is a full legal challenge leading to a prolonged court battle. A third possibility is selective enforcement, where federal authorities focus on specific areas while avoiding a broad confrontation. Each option carries risks. Compromise could disappoint supporters, legal battles could delay programs, escalation could strain relationships further. The Governor's challenge is to choose a path that protects California's interests without causing unnecessary harm to residents. This situation highlights a broader issue in American governance: the ongoing tension between state innovation and federal authority. California has often positioned itself as a policy leader. But leadership sometimes comes with conflict. As pressure continues to mount, Californians are watching closely. What happens next will not only shape California's future, but could also influence how states and the federal government interact across the country. For now, one thing is clear. The clash over federal policy has placed California's governor under intense scrutiny. And the outcome of this battle may define the next chapter of state-federal relations in America.